Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be showing you guys the difference between making a sourdough loaf with all-purpose flour and bread flour. There were a few differences that I noticed as I made these loaves. So let's get straight into the video. I made the two loaves with the exact same recipe. I did 125 grams of active sourdough starter. I added 350 grams of filtered water, 500 grams of all-purpose flour. On the orange bowl, I did the all-purpose, and in the clear bowl, I did the bread flour. So I did the exact same recipe for both. The only difference was the flour. You can see here that I am switching between the two bowls. I am trying to mix the dough at the same time so they can start bulk fermenting at the same time. So for the two recipes, I did do the stretch and folds and everything at the exact same time. I used King Arthur's all-purpose flour and bread flour on the recipes. This is my favorite flour to use on my sourdough loaves. So I mixed everything together, and once all the ingredients were mixed, I let the dough sit on the counter for 1 hour before starting on our first set of stretch and folds. So here is what both doughs look like side by side, both very shaggy. We wait 1 hour and then we start on our first set. So this is the first set right here. Immediately we noticed that the dough with the all-purpose flour was much looser. It was almost a little bit like more wet, and the bread flour was a little thicker. It was less sticky. It like absorbed more of the water in a way, and since it does have more protein, it makes sense. It absorbed a little bit more of the water, so it was a little bit stronger, I feel. So when we would do the stretch and folds, it wouldn't pull as much as the all-purpose, if that makes sense. Like the all-purpose flour stretched out a little bit more than the bread flour. So here is the second set of stretch and folds. I apologize for the angle and all the movement. My tripod broke and I was holding my phone as my husband did the stretch and folds as I held our baby. So it was very hard, but this is the second set, and the same thing. We felt like the dough from the bread flour was a little bit stronger than the all-purpose. On the third set, we did notice that both doughs were very strong, but the all-purpose flour remained being more on the wet side. So we let both doughs bulk ferment on the counter for the same amount of time. And I think the all-purpose overproofed a little bit. I don't know if maybe the water amount that it had was, maybe has to be adjusted to a little bit less water so that both can finish bulk fermenting at the same time. So I wanted to bulk ferment them at the same time just to see if there was a difference, and clearly there was. So once it was time to shape the doughs, I started with the bread flour dough, and this dough was perfect. It was nice and jiggly, it was bubbly. It wasn't sticking to my hands or to my mat, even though I didn't flour my mat or my hands. I could see bubbles on the surface of the dough forming, and once it was time for the all-purpose flour dough, I noticed that it was a little bit over fermented. So maybe we need to adjust the timing for all-purpose flour, since it does, I guess technically in a way, have a little bit more water content because it has less protein in the flour. So you can see here that the dough was kind of sticking to my hands and to my mat. So I just continued to do push and pull motions until I felt like I had enough tension on my dough. And I let them both rest on the counter for about 10 to 15 minutes before I did the final shaping. So here is the final shaping. You can tell immediately that the all-purpose dough that I'm shaping right now was more on the flat side right before I started shaping it. It didn't really have that many bubbles, and the bread flour dough on the top right did hold its shape a little bit better. You can see the bubbles on the top, and it just looks a little bit more firm. So I put the all-purpose dough in this banneton with no logo on it just to differentiate the loaves and not get confused when I put them in the refrigerator. For the bread flour dough, I did shape it and put it into a banneton that had a logo on it. And the bread flour just shaped so beautifully. So I think if you are going to use all-purpose flour, definitely keep an eye on the bulk fermentation. It won't bulk ferment at the same time that bread flour will, unless maybe you add less water to your recipe. Not such a fun fact, but I had ordered a second Dutch oven to film this video so I could bake both loaves at the same time. But my Dutch oven got lost. The mail carrier misplaced it, and now I have to file a claim to try to get a new one or a replacement. But in a way, it was good because I baked both loaves in the same Dutch oven, one after the other, so there was literally no difference at all with anything that I used. So I preheated my oven to 450 degrees and I baked both loaves for 30 minutes with the lid on and 15 minutes with the lid off. So this is the all-purpose flour. We are just going to score it. We gave the same score to both loaves, but we decided to add like a little X on the all-purpose dough just to make sure that we didn't confuse the loaves, just in case my kids accidentally move them around on the table, or I don't know. We just wanted to make sure that we didn't confuse them. So here we are putting it in the oven, and then this is the end result of this loaf. So now we are going to score the bread flour loaf. You can see that this loaf is a little bit more on the firm side. It doesn't flatten out as much as the all-purpose flour did, and I think it's because the other one overproofed. But here we're gonna just bake it real quick for you guys, and then this is the end result of the outside. It actually looks more toasty than the all-purpose flour, even though they were baked the same amount of time. So here is a side-by-side comparison of both. You can definitely see a difference here where the bread flour opened up a little bit more. It's a little bit more like domed at the top. It's fuller rather than the all-purpose flour. The crumb, it was a little bit tighter on the all-purpose flour, and on the bread flour it's a little bit more open, but of course it didn't come out perfect because when I film, my bread doesn't like to come out perfect. But they both tasted great. The bread flour tastes less sour in my opinion. So if you bake with all purpose, just make sure you adjust the water content and the bulk fermentation time. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you in my next one.